Things that hinder facilitating competence in our classrooms.
The schools that we work with, when you ask meaningful questions, you get meaningful responses.
Yeah, there's 3 core psychological needs that we need to meet in order for a young person to be intrinsically motivated.
Teachers get often frustrated when young people don't know how much marking there is to do, and then young people get really frustrated when teachers don't recognise and acknowledge what's going on at home as well.
We're learning how to debate and to share ideas with people around us.
Podclass acknowledges the true and traditional custodians of the land we meet on here today. We are meeting in Naarm and pay our respect to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today.
So no one told you teaching was gonna be this way. Your lesson plans are jokes, your patience broke, you're feeling in disarray. It's like you're always stuck in report writing, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your school year. But I'll be here for you.
When the students start to riot,
I'll be here for you.
even if your coffee's gone cold,
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.
Hello and welcome back to Podclass, where you are joined by 2 teachers and a 21-year-old CEO. I am Amanda and I am joined with my co-founder Skye. We are the co-founders of Youth Engagement Project, and we are also joined by the founder of Youth Leadership Academy Australia, Will Massara.
Will Massara, that's you. Say
that is me.
g'day.
Hello, how are you?
Say my name, say my name.
What a brand! Welcome to a brand new day, team. Excited to be here. This is the one on student engagement.
The one on student engagement. What a great word. What a great words. I'm an English teacher, so that was brilliant.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
Some really important words here. Student engagement. So what is student engagement? Probably we should start there. It's something that we hear about all the time in education. We hear about it. Will you hear about it in your, I know that it's been feedback that you get every single feedback form for any event that you
Thousands.
run, which is positive, we might add. It's like,
so great.
hard to believe you kept students engaged for 5.5 hours, like yada, 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 because teachers know, and I love it because it's teachers giving this feedback. They know how hard it is to do that, especially in this day and age, right? Because teachers are competing for student engagement.
Absolutely.
So many things.
And also our young people's attention span is really naturally decreasing over time.
Not
because
on the defence here, not only young people's attention spans.
Okay,
Everyone's,
sorry,
everyone's.
everyone's
our
attention spans. Okay.
are
It's true.
decreasing at an accelerating rate.
Yes, absolutely. So true. Sorry.
It's just defending it. They are so defensive.
So it's true
Just
for
jump over the
everyone.
table.
Engagement is, our attention spans are decreasing because we have so much more that we're competing with now, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's so interesting because so often I feel like, you know, for educators, for anyone working in the youth space, this engagement piece is something that's kind of like, you know, when it's there, it's so great. And, you know, if we're presenting from the front of a room, or if we're sitting in an audience, when we're experiencing engagement, it feels so great and we're right there with them and we can't look away and we're on board and the learning is landing and it's terrific. And then when engagement is not there, it's kind of clunky, it's hard to get people to listen, or we don't feel like we can follow the concept. And so the big question is, well, what's the difference? Why? You know, it sometimes feels like this mythical thing, engagement. Why is it there sometimes and then sometimes it's not there?
And I know Will, like, I mean, you're a young person. We're also young people, but you're
So
a younger person. And we were just talking off air before we started. We were kind of doing a bit of a recap of your experience in school and what that was like for you. And you were saying that for most of your schooling experience, you were like pretty disengaged as a student, but there was something in particular that helped engage you in classes. And I feel like this is a really great time to maybe talk about that.
I really did struggle to engage in school, and I struggled to get excited about school, and the only thing that did get me excited or a little bit interested was having some sort of relationship and rapport with the teacher or the class. And that was the thing that would get buy-in for me.
Yeah. So relationships, right? It was that rapport building piece.
Yeah.
And we know that as educators, that's just like it's so important. It's literally can be such a foundational piece. And I think, and we're going to talk about this a little bit today, but it can really be, I think, one of the easiest ways for teachers to step into engagement with their students.
I really agree. I think that rapport building piece is so huge. And as teachers, like we know that. We know, you know, how it works when we have a strong relationship with a student versus when we have a challenging relationship with a student. And there's always reasons why. However, you know, if we can have some strategies, which we will be covering, for building that rapport, for building that relationship piece, it really makes a difference. So I guess let's start with, because Skye and I happen to be we've, you know, gone really down the rabbit hole with this engagement thing because we've been in the education space for so long.
Yeah.
We do a lot of presenting and talking with young people, and we've really researched and looked into why is engagement there sometimes and then just not there sometimes.
Yeah, and we've learned a few things along the way, and one of those weird. And one of those things is that what we know is that engagement, we can tell if a young person is engaged because we can actually see there's like physical features or observations that we can make. We can see their body language, their facial expressions, listen to their conversations, way they communicate with their peers. All of these things, when we are attuned to them, can tell us whether or not a young person is engaged. And what we know is like engagement is not a new word, but it's a new word in a lot of this research space. And what we've learned going down this rabbit hole is that intrinsic motivation is explicitly linked to engagement. So if we can tap into a young person's intrinsic motivation and not have them be relying on extrinsic rewards or to be extrinsically motivated to do something, if we can tap into their intrinsic motivation, that equates to engagement.
Absolutely.
So
So
how?
essentially,
how?
we're
Great
going to
question,
talk
Will.
about that.
Tell
And
me.
to essentially like sum that up, engagement is like, it's like publicly viewable features of what is happening inside a young person. And to flip that on the other way, disengagement similarly is just publicly viewable features of, once again, something going on within that young person or something not there. So intrinsic motivation, not there.
Will's like, my question still stands.
How?
This sounds great.
sounds
How
great.
do we do it?
So we went down this rabbit hole and we have become very good friends with a theory called self-determination theory, which was coined
I
by
reckon we're besties.
besties with it, coined by some
Heard of it.
researchers, Jesse and Ryan. And basically self-determination theory says that there's 3 core psychological needs that we need to meet. And this doesn't just apply to students, right? This applies to any human
Humans,
being
absolutely.
on planet Earth.
Yeah.
But there are 3 core psychological needs that we need to meet in order for a young person to be intrinsically motivated and therefore engaged.
Yeah.
And those 3 psychological needs are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Amanda, do you want to explain what each of them are?
Absolutely. There's the rapport piece,
Yeah,
right? That when you
exactly.
had the rapport, you felt engaged.
Yeah.
So the first one is autonomy. Autonomy, you know, we're all familiar with this. It's a sense of having agency or choice in our spaces. So it looks like providing opportunities for young people to have a say or have choice in their personal learning journey and also in the class's learning journey. The second piece is competence. Competence, love this so much. It is providing young people, all people, but we're talking about young people here. It's providing young people with the opportunity to experience optimal challenge. So what's optimal challenge? It's a challenge that is just outside our depth, but close enough in that we have to grow a bit to meet it, right? So what that means, because if it's not an optimal challenge, if it's just like a deep, dark challenge, our young person will likely engage before they meet it.
A deep, dark challenge.
disengage.
I feel like I'm in like a fantasy
Oh
book
my gosh,
series.
I know.
A deep, dark challenge.
Love it.
Can I just say there too, just really briefly on the optimal challenge piece? I know, like as a teacher, that's something that I would always find challenging myself
Yes.
because of the differing needs of students in a classroom. And Will, I'm sure that you understand this as well. Like every student's at a different level. The same students that come to your conferences that you work with in schools, in your school workshops, like not everyone has the same experiences, knowledge and understanding. And there's another buzzword always in education, which is differentiation.
Yes.
And optimal challenge is really a point of that where we can tap into that and a little bit more. But I just want to preface that it's not always easy to do that for every single student in a classroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tough gig.
Tough gig. Teaching
the
is a tough gig. Teachers
Oh
are
my
underpaid and overworked, and I could
goodness.
talk about that for days, but
Yes.
it's like honestly one of the most important professions, and there's so many teachers, like thousands and thousands and thousands of teachers, and we literally rely on them.
Can I side note my theory?
Yes.
I think
It's not self-determination theory. It's Will Massara
it's my
theory. Hit us with it.
so. If we pay teachers as much as doctors, and we really focus on health, then we wouldn't even need doctors.
Oh.
I mean, I love the theory. I do think it could be disproven because I think medicine is important, but I do think that there would be better, people would be genuinely healthier though in terms of their
Yes.
mental well-being and all of that kind of
Yes.
stuff. Absolutely.
I love the concept. I love the concept, and I think maybe not that we won't need doctors anymore, but that in general will have, a well as society. And I feel like as well, just to that point, just briefly, it's also not just about the money, it's about, I feel, time.
Yes.
And the juggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so much, in my personal experience, it's so much more about the challenge of the juggle than the money. So I feel like, let's pay teachers more, but also, this is such a side note, let's pay teachers more, but let's also address this juggle that teachers face on a minute-to-minute, day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to our other theory.
We spoke about autonomy, we spoke about competence, and the third thing is relatedness.
Yes. So relatedness is just that. It's precisely what Will answered, when Will's like, I was engaged when I had that rapport in that relationship. That is relatedness. It's providing young people with opportunities which this, it happens really naturally amongst our young people as well. It's not just relatedness between the teacher and the student, it's also relatedness amongst each other.
100%.
It's feeling a sense of belonging with the people we're in the space with.
I was just saying, as teachers, we understand it, right? It's like that age-old saying of your vibe attracts your tribe, or the people that, when you show up a certain way, you kind of attract those similar kind of people.
Or you get back what you put in.
Yeah, and we see that as teachers, right? You'll have maybe a student who's maybe a little bit disengaged. They're the student that's, vaping in the bathroom at lunchtime, and all of a sudden all the vapors in the school seem to find each other magically, like this weird magnet. And it's the same thing, right? It's but there's a reason why, because the theory that backs that up, this psychological theory, is great. That might not be the best choice, and they're probably not the best, social group. But what those young people get out of it is a sense of belonging. They have that feeling of relatedness amongst them, that other people get them, and they've got people in their corner. So it makes sense why that happens.
Totally. It really does make sense. And we've all seen that happen everywhere. And we've experienced it. I mean, maybe it's not the vaping in the bathroom, but we've experienced that pull to a group of individuals that are like-minded.
I think that's why we're around this little dinner table right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
Us three.
Oh, that's so nice.
that's so true.
But I also you can build relationships just by having conversation. We always share with at the schools that we work with, when you ask meaningful questions, you get meaningful responses.
Yeah.
Love that.
And I think teachers get often frustrated when young people don't know how much marking there is to do. And then young people get really frustrated when teachers don't recognise they acknowledge what's going on at home as well.
Yeah.
And just through having conversations, you break down these assumptions and these frustrations, and you build a whole lot of compassion as well for one another.
That's such an important piece on empathy there, right? It's but again, that's something that we have to be able to nurture and teach and grow. And let's just chuck that onto the teaching workload.
my
we don't have
gosh,
more
so
to worry
much.
about in a school. But I so get it. But I also understand from that teacher lens that some of these things as well, it seems to be the responsibility of a teacher. And we forget that students also have an entire life outside of school where they've got maybe parents or guardians or, clubs or whatever, coaching, sporting stuff, where these skills can also be being taught and implemented.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
also, I think that if they are learning these skills outside of school, it's a huge privilege.
Yes.
And that as a system, as a whole, we need to start accepting that they spend a third of their awake hours and awake life in childhood at school, and it's like
Yeah.
a moral obligation to not only
It's so
educate
true.
their
I
brain,
literally-
but also their heart.
I literally had a student say to me last year, "Hey, Miss Hughes, did you know that I see you more often than I see my mum?"
Yeah.
And I was like, I just had that,
Yes.
and like, you know that
And
logically,
that would
but
be
I was
so
like, whoa.
common. That would be so common.
common.
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
like my thoughts is like, how do we just embed it into teaching rather than adding on more lessons or more curriculum?
Well, it's almost like we planned that segue, and I can tell you
my
that it was
gosh.
not. But I love that because we have these
How
like
do we embed it, Skye?
How do
How?
we do that? How?
The
how?
question of the episode.
It really is. So the question is so how do we do this without it being adding on to the teacher workload? Without it being
Absolutely.
work creep, being something that we can just naturally embed into the way that we interact with students, the way that we run lessons. Cool. So let's break it down, psychological need to psychological need. So if we know that engagement's built through autonomy, competence, and relatedness, what are we doing that helps those things? What are we doing that maybe hinders or thwarts those things in a school setting?
Absolutely.
So let's talk to autonomy first. Let's just go in
Yes.
order, and we'll just do like rapid fire, a couple of quick tips, skills, strategies you can do. How does that sound?
Sounds terrific.
Okay, so autonomy.
Autonomy. Self-determination theory tells us here are things that hinder autonomy in the classroom. So that moves young people away from engagement and toward disengagement. They are using pressuring language, setting up
What's pressuring language? Give me one.
pressuring language. An example of that is, you must do this now or else X.
Oh yeah, that would
Right?
disengage me. That would work.
That hinders autonomy. Another example is activities
Will's
that
just getting PTSD from his own schooling experience.
sorry, it was possibly a bit intense. It was dramatized, for all of us. Setting up activities that exclude some students, setting up really pressuring activities, using praise as a contingent award, and exhibiting solutions or answers. So there's some things that hinder autonomy in the classroom.
Yeah, and it's hard, right? Because when I first started learning about self-determination theory, I'd be like, oh, I've been doing some of
Oh
these
my
things.
goodness,
And I think
yes.
going back to like Will spoke about compassion and empathy before, like also be compassionate and empathetic towards yourself. Because it's so important to kind of unlearn some of the things we're also taught in university, and it's kind of, strummed into us when we start in this space as well. So how do we help? How do we build
I
autonomy?
have a follow-up question first.
Yes.
So you say praise.
Yes.
So does that mean we can't acknowledge students?
No, sorry. So it's using praise as a contingency. So it's only giving praise in exchange for X, for example.
Yeah, and it should be like when we're giving praise, it should be distributed like amongst all students, like
Yeah.
not the same student receiving praise all the time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like we talk about it in the feedback piece, right? So we talk about like praise and feedback rather than going, you're amazing, or you did that, or great work. Like that's not really valuable feedback or valuable praise. It's like focusing on those specific things that we can do for students as
Yeah.
well, or give to students.
Yeah, like an example of this might be like, for example, if we've returned all of the test scores and then I were to stand at the front and say, and I would just really like to acknowledge that 6 people got A+. Let's give them a clap. Right? That is contingent reward praise.
But because you might have
feel too
10 students in
Yeah.
that room that have got Bs, and that's the first B that they've ever received in their entire
Absolutely.
schooling. That's
Which
a
is
huge
huge.
achievement for them. Do you know what I mean?
Huge.
It's like it's so,
So
unfair.
huge.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
We could talk about this for literally hours, but we're not going to.
And just on your point, Skye, as well, about being compassionate, this is such a journey, and I would like to acknowledge that I take hindering actions with young people at times. I feel like we all do.
Yeah.
And it's just about bringing awareness to it. So the more we talk about it, the more we can bring awareness to it, and then the more we notice it in the moment as well. So how do we help autonomy?
So we can help autonomy by allowing as many opportunities as we can for student input, for student choice in the things that we're doing. We can teach in the way that students prefer, and we'll talk about this probably in another episode down the line.
Yeah.
But we talk about this thing called common ground, and how do we find and build common ground with students, and this is part of that. Providing rationales or the why behind we're doing things in class. Like, I'm an English teacher and a media teacher, and I know that when I introduce a text like, we're going to be studying The Great Gatsby, kids are like, yawn, I can't think of anything more boring or whatever it is. But if we talk about English as being, we're developing our critical thinking skills. We're learning how to articulate our ideas in a clear and succinct way. We're learning how to debate and to share ideas with people around us. Like, we're not learning The Great Gatsby, we're learning all of these things instead. Suddenly students and their buy-in becomes so much stronger because of that, and it increases their autonomy.
And that feels so different as well to something like, well, we're doing it because we have to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's
Because you're in school and that's what you've got to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and I feel like that why behind, in my experience, that's so important everywhere. And also if we acknowledge students that are maybe EALD or, with trauma backgrounds, that why, in my experience, is even more important.
And finally, allowing students to work at their own pace and their own paced progress. So I implemented something last year where students wouldn't have like a set due date. And I know this is different in some states based on your requirements, but students wouldn't have a set date. I would have a due week. So students, depending on where they're at, could submit anything between Monday and Friday.
Yeah.
So my students who were super onto it, great, they got it in on Monday morning. My students who were probably like me in school and were those
on
last
Friday,
minute.
3 p.m. I was thinking, Friday,
Me
3 p.m.
too. Yeah.
But it's also giving them that autonomy, right? They've got a choice.
Yeah.
So by providing that choice, it's not like this rigid,
That's
strict
epic. I like
deadline. So that's like something as well that we did. Okay, that's autonomy. Competence.
So
fly
here are
through
some
these.
things that hinder facilitating competence in our classrooms. One is publicly presenting critical feedback. So in front of everyone else, giving critical feedback to a student, super hindering. Another is criticizing a fixed quality. So for example, if we have a student and they have a fixed quality of just being maybe quite a calm and reserved person, if we were to criticize that fixed quality, it's making them wrong,
Or even something like, oh, you're too short, you shouldn't be playing basketball.
Like,
well, they can't change their
seriously,
height.
yeah, actually. Criticizing losing via peer comparison. So if we shaping,
But how's this? When I was in school, they used to give us the little every term a report card with what rank you were in the class. No, what rank you were in the year on a bell curve. Yeah.
So you'd be
So
like,
you mean-
I'm
you don't
the
mean-
67th student out of 150
you don't mean like
or
your
something.
personal,
My
like for
personal
example,
rank.
But like this
Number
isn't.
67.
But this is out of no, don't do it.
Well, in sport, I was the bottom of the bell curve.
Okay, so this
I'm
isn't
not very good
like
at badminton, netball, or soccer, but I also didn't really show up.
Yeah, but you also have other strengths outside of that, right?
It was literally
Okay,
the bottom of year 12.
that is an example of hindering competency in our young people, everyone.
And I think, like, hopefully will. I mean, to be fair, though, you have not been out of school for that long. But I'm hoping that has changed.
And
I
also,
really
it's-
hope.
I don't want to quote this, but I think it may have been statewide public in WA.
Wow.
So hectic.
If you're from WA, please let me know. Because I really remember you get a thing every term.
And here we
in
go.
every single class.
But we're sitting here years later and you remember that. And what are the feelings that arise for you?
Well, I didn't go to sport.
There you go.
There we go. Right?
That says enough.
Huge. So
I
there's
was
some
one of them
things
kids that my friends wrote parent letters
That
for
can
me.
hinder.
there's some things that
can
hinder competence. So what are some things that help competence?
So some of the things that help, Amanda's already mentioned it, but things like providing optimal challenge for our
Mm-hmm.
students, giving specific feedback, praising improvement or effort
Mm-hmm.
over, a specific result or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Like fair use of praise. So sometimes it's just a huge thing for a student to just raise their hand and contribute in class. It doesn't matter if they get the response correct or not. It's just the fact they've put their hand up, and using fair praise and reward in that way as well. As teachers, actually displaying hope and optimism and courage ourselves. So role modeling what that looks like, having a positive attitude towards learning ourselves. The way that we show up energetically in a classroom is so mirrored by our students. I know days where I've been like tired and run down and not feeling it and maybe a little bit, pissed off at the system or whatever it might be, rolling in and feeling that also reflected back at me and my students. And they were my most challenging lessons, as opposed to the ones where I'd go in and be like, I'm going to be in a really great mood today, hopeful, positive, all those kind of things, and feel that reflected as well.
And on that note, what the self-determination theory tells us, and no pressure team, but what self-determination theory tells us is that the teacher or the facilitator is the biggest, how they show up and how they present and how they run their classroom is the biggest indicator of the engagement our students experience, which is why when you show up in that space, we see that reflected back.
Yeah.
It's the biggest factor.
Absolutely. And we could honestly go through these forever. We're going to jump into relatedness, knowing we'll probably revisit this at some point, and maybe in our show
100%.
notes we'll put a little list in of these different things so that you can have a read through them yourself. So the last one is relatedness. So really quickly, just top 3 things that we can do that hinder relatedness.
So number 1, ignoring students. Number 2, using abusive language. And number 3, providing unfair punishment.
I'm like having all these flashbacks of like, this is why I hated school so much.
Oh,
Or like, not necessarily school, but maybe a certain class, and why, like, because it was like all these things. I was like, yes, okay, makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So there are hindering factors. What are our helping factors?
Helping factors, actually genuinely, which I know Will spoke to this at the very start, building a relationship with students. So asking them about their progress, checking in on how they're feeling, those kind of things. Expressing like positive affection for our students. And that's not obviously appropriate, everyone, but thinking about like, you know, things that's like, oh, I'm really proud of the way that you did that, or the way that you showed up, or you're such a great friend in this way, or whatever it might be, and showing our young people that we see them, we see who they are, we see those qualities that are outside of just their learning and the way that they're performing in tests. And things like promoting cooperation between our students, promoting collaboration, providing opportunities for them to work in groups, to share ideas. And I think finally, just teacher enthusiasm in general. We can build relatedness with our young people when we're also showing up as our best selves.
Yeah, that matching piece is huge. How we show up, our students so often meet that and match that.
We love it.
So
so many things there. That's been I know there's been so much information.
So much information. Everyone say engagement.
Engagement.
Here we are.
Sorry, bit out of time.
Everyone hands in, team. No.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Will. I feel like the throwbacks to your schooling. Oh my gosh, it just so many reminders
really blocked
there.
it out until this conversation.
crazy.
Wow, but it's just so much evidence that like this is real, and this research, you know, it's global. And what I would also like to add is that this has been found to be true across, you know, geographical locations, across cultural locations, across language shifts, cultural, you know, this has been looked at all across the world in different social and dynamics, different socioeconomic statuses, and it's been found to be true, this data, across all.
Yeah, I think that if we're thinking about implementing some of these strategies, we can't do all of this at once. We're not superhuman.
Oh my goodness,
but just take one thing and be like, all right, so what's one thing I'm going to do to increase autonomy today? What's one thing I'm going to do to increase competence? What's one thing I'm going to do to increase relatedness? And slowly by slowly, this will start to just become a natural part of your practice. This isn't in addition to your workload. It's just about the way that you show up and you interact with young people.
And so often it's just slight shifts in our approach, in our facilitation, and in, you know, how we talk with young people. So there we are.
There we are. This is Podclass.
Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next week.
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.